was the kind of night where silence felt heavy, the lake wrapped in a mist that clung to the water like smoke. The cabin sat at the end of a private dirt road, hidden behind tall trees and a rusty gate that had not been touched in weeks. The air was cold, sharp, carrying only the sound of crickets and the faint splash of fish breaking the lake's surface. It was 3 a.m. when the headlights cut through the darkness, my truck crunching slowly along the gravel path toward the cabin gate. The lake had always been a retreat, a place to escape from the noise of the city and the politics of neighborhood associations. But that night, the air felt charged, like a storm was brewing even though the sky was clear. As I pulled up to the gate, I stepped out of the truck, keys in hand, and felt the gravel shift under my boots. The gate creaked when I touched it, a metallic groan that echoed louder than it should have in the dead of night. Unbeknownst to me, someone had been watching. Across the street, in a neatly trimmed yard with security lights glaring bright, Karen, the self-appointed queen of the local HOA, was awake. She claimed she stayed up for safety patrols, but in reality, she spent her nights peering out of curtains, waiting for the smallest excuse to wield her authority. At 3 a.m., the sight of a man unlocking a gate to a cabin by the lake was more than enough. Her curtains twitched, and her eyes widened with suspicion. To her, I was not the rightful owner of the cabin, not someone who had paperwork to prove it, but a trespasser, maybe even a criminal. Her hand reached for the phone with the speed of habit. The glow of her screen lit her face as she dialed 911, whispering into the receiver about a suspicious man at the cabin, emphasizing the danger, painting me as a threat. As I pushed the gate open, the hinges screamed, carrying through the still night air. My truck lights illuminated the wooden sign on the cabin fence, my family name etched deep into the grain. The place had been mine for years, purchased with hard-earned money, but Karen's version of the truth was already being etched into the dispatcher's log. Police cars were on their way, rushing down the quiet highway toward the lake. What Karen didn't know, what would soon unravel her carefully staged drama, was that I carried more than just the keys to the cabin. Hanging on my belt, beneath my jacket, was the badge that had silenced far greater confrontations than a midnight gate check. It was a badge she had never expected to see. And in a matter of minutes she would. The mist thickened as I drove the truck through the gate and parked in front of the cabin. I cut the engine, leaving only the sound of the water and the faint chirping of the night. But in the distance, faint at first, the red and blue lights began to flicker against the trees. Tires hummed against the road. The peace of the lake was about to shatter, all because Karen had dialed 3 numbers out of spite and suspicion. The officers were arriving, fast, headlights piercing the darkness, and Karen stepped proudly out of her yard in a robe, arms folded, already rehearsing the story she would tell. She thought she was about to see a stranger hauled away. Instead, she was about to see something that would stop her cold. Because the next few minutes were mine, not hers. And she was not ready for what came next. The flash of red and blue lights grew brighter as the first patrol car pulled up, tires hissing on the gravel. The stillness of the lake shattered as beams from flashlights swept across the trees, bouncing off the gate I had just unlocked. Karen had already crossed the road in her robe and slippers, standing near the patrol car like she was the one who had called in a crime that demanded urgent attention. Her voice carried in the night, shrill and dramatic. She gestured toward my cabin with wild hands, her face twisted in self-righteous fury. She painted me as a dangerous intruder, someone lurking around where I did not belong. The officers, still alert and cautious, followed her pointing finger. Their eyes moved from Karen's agitated stance to me, standing calmly in front of the cabin door. The night air grew colder as tension settled in. The officers stepped forward, their boots crunching the gravel, hands hovering close to their belts. They ordered me to step into the light, and for a moment, I let them see nothing but an ordinary man at the wrong place at the wrong time. Karen smirked, convinced her performance was working. To her, this was victory, the neighborhood saved from the threat she had imagined. But her confidence began to falter when I raised my hands slowly, not in surrender, but in deliberate control. I reached into my jacket, pulling free the leather badge wallet I carried everywhere. The gleam of the shield caught the sweep of their flashlights, polished and unmistakable. The air shifted instantly. The officers froze, their posture changing from suspicion to recognition. Their faces hardened, but their tones softened, the hostility gone in an instant. Karen, however, stood frozen on the side of the road, her expression collapsing from smug certainty into disbelief. This was not the script she had written in her head. She had expected shouts, handcuffs, maybe even a dramatic takedown in her front yard. What she got instead was silence. Heavy, damning silence. The officers turned toward me with respect, asking short, professional questions to confirm what they already suspected. This was no intruder. This was an officer of the law, someone whose name carried more authority than Karen's nightly patrols and HOA rulebooks ever could. Karen tried to recover. She raised her voice again, desperate to steer the night back under her control. She insisted she had seen me breaking in, insisted the cabin was not mine, insisted the entire neighborhood was in danger. But her words were weaker now, her voice less convincing, because no matter how hard she argued, that badge gleamed in the darkness, undeniable proof of who I was. The officers glanced at her with growing irritation. She was wasting their time. Every exaggerated complaint, every accusation she tried to hurl toward me, only made her look more unhinged. I said little. I did not need to. The power in moments like these came from patience, from silence that exposed the cracks in someone else's lies. I simply stood by the cabin gate, my badge visible, while Karen's story crumbled. Finally, one of the officers asked her to step aside. She bristled, stunned that her role as the protector of the community was being dismissed so easily. She tried again, but her voice cracked under the weight of disbelief. She wasn't winning. She wasn't controlling. She was being ignored. The patrol cars stayed, but the tension was gone. The officers spoke with me calmly, verifying the deed records that matched my name, details Karen had never bothered to check. To them this was over. To Karen, it was the beginning of humiliation she had never imagined. And yet, the night was not done. Because while Karen stood seething on the gravel road, I was already considering the next step. It wasn't just about silencing her. It was about making sure this HOA circus ended once and for all. And as she watched me walk toward the cabin door, her face pale in the glow of flashing lights, she had no idea the real reckoning hadn't even started yet. By the following morning, whispers had already spread through the lake community. Neighbors peeked from porches, some pretending to sweep their driveways just to catch a glimpse of me. The patrol cars at 3 a.m. hadn't gone unnoticed, and neither had the look on Karen's face when my badge silenced her accusations. The HOA tried to recover quickly. Karen called an emergency board meeting, determined to paint herself as the victim, claiming she had only acted to protect the neighborhood. But her version of events clashed with what others had witnessed. Everyone had seen her standing in slippers and robe, screaming at police to take me away, while I stood calmly with proof of my authority. Soon the narrative shifted. Karen wasn't a protector. She was an instigator. She had dragged officers out in the middle of the night, wasted their resources, and embarrassed the HOA in front of the very neighbors she claimed to represent. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to seek revenge. The truth unraveled on its own. The officers filed their report, noting that Karen's 911 call was exaggerated and misleading. The board received complaints from residents, tired of her paranoia and late-night power trips. Even her closest allies began to distance themselves, unwilling to be tied to her humiliation. Within weeks, Karen stepped down as HOA president. Her resignation wasn't dramatic. Just a quiet notice slipped into the community bulletin. The woman who had strutted through the neighborhood with a clipboard now avoided eye contact whenever she passed by. And the cabin. It remained mine, untouched and peaceful. The same gate she had tried to weaponize against me now opened freely each weekend as I arrived to enjoy the lake in silence. The irony lingered. She had called 911 at 3 a.m. to expose me as a threat, but in doing so, she had exposed herself. Not to the law, not to the police, but to her own neighbors who had finally seen the truth. Her power was nothing more than fear and performance. And once fear was gone, she had nothing left. So what do you think? Was this justice? Did Karen deserve the public humiliation she brought on herself? Or was it too much? In the end, the badge didn't just protect me. It revealed who really belonged at that cabin, and who never truly belonged in control.